Yes, I started flight screening, which was before officer training school, in September of 1983, and then went to Columbus Air Force Base right after that for pilot training, and I retired March of 2005. I went to the B-52 in 1990, and I was mission qualified just before Gulf War One kicked off. So I did not deploy to that one. The B-52H model wasn't invited because of its capabilities, so we got to watch it on CNN. Yes, I did nuclear alert for 2 of the 3 years, and then they closed it down. The country maintained a nuclear alert force, the missiles in silos, nuclear submarines, and then the air-breathing component, B-52s at the time, and then later B-1s. And we were on an alert. We'd spend a week in the facility, which I found out later didn't actually qualify as even a prison. The rooms were too small. But all of the crews that were on alert that week would live in this little barbed wire enclosed facility, and we would be ready to run out to the airplane, start up, and go do the mission. We were armed with special weapons. We would fly to our targets if the United States was attacked. And it was a one-way trip. I'm sorry for being dramatic. We had a plan for recovering, but it was farcical. In fact, the tanker pilots, I showed up at Fairchild, brand new aircraft commander in the B-52, and I'm getting enculturated now to this new environment, and the tanker pilots kept running around calling themselves toads, T-O-A-D-S. So I asked, finally, I thought, well, that's really disparaging. Why are they calling themselves that? So I asked my co-pilot, and he said, no, it's actually a badge of honor. It stands for take off and die. Because there was a code, the B-52s were the primary mission, the tankers were support. And there was a code that we might have to pass to the tanker pilots to take all of their fuel, which means they would crash shortly after the refueling, and we would go on and do our mission. So about once a week we would practice, usually at 2:30 in the morning or so. When it was icy and snowy, they'd ring the klaxon and all the crews would run out to the airplanes, and we would start up. I was not around when they did what they called elephant walks, where we would start the engines and then everybody would taxi out to the runway, and then they would call end of the exercise. So X number of B-52s taxiing out to the runway, that was called an elephant walk. We would go to engine start, and then they would call it off, and we would just shut down again, and then go back to bed. Yeah, it was, we weren't supposed to know that it was coming, but we would do one every alert. During the war, since the H model B-52s didn't go, we had the exclusive mission for that nuclear deterrent. So I was on alert probably 2 to 3 weeks out of every month, as opposed to 1 week a month. And Dana would visit me when she could. But it was that was kind of the hard part of that. Was we were brand new to the state. She didn't know anybody. I didn't really know anybody except my crew, and it was a weird life for a while of being on the same Air Force base but not being able to see each other as essentially newlyweds. Fairchild Air Force Base up in Spokane, Washington.
Okay.
So after that, I went to Randolph to be an instructor again. Then Turkey after that, worked with Northern Watch, protecting the northern no-fly zone in Iraq after the first Gulf War there. And spent 15 months in Turkey. Dana came over to visit once. We visited some of the sites and was working with French, Brits, and doing defense of Southern Europe planning for NATO and EUCOM. So that was an interesting job. Traveled around all of Turkey, most of Southern Europe, and then I've worked with fighters and airborne command and control, tankers, international, doing the northern no-fly zone thing. Incirlik, I did travel to Izmir a couple of times, and as far west as Diyarbakir, just north of Syria there. Stayed in a hotel once that was 1,000 years old. It had a courtyard that would accommodate 500 camels or something like that. That was kind of fun. And yeah, traveled extensively, which was enriching. Got to meet a lot of nice people. And then back to 19th Air Force at Randolph in the safety world for a little bit. And then 6 months after 9/11, I deployed over to Operation Enduring Freedom, working with B-1s, not actually in Afghanistan, but kind of in the neighborhood. You know, the military life is, as you know from your experience, it's different than civilian life. In some ways, it's easier, it's more structured. You know who your friends are typically, especially when you're deployed and you have a mission. And it's one team, one fight. And when there's not a mission, you still have the rank structure. But military people are, well, from my perspective, most of my career has been around pilots. And I wouldn't say that pilots are the paragons of virtue necessarily. You know, we're not recruited to be SEALs or Rangers or pilots or comm officers because we're couth necessarily. It's because we have a certain skill set to do our thing. And there are things that, you know, I'd probably do again if I had the option. And there's some things I would have done differently. But the bottom line is, did the mission get accomplished? And that may be a little bit of a twisted look at what faith is, but if you consider fulfilling your role as being faithful, then maybe some of the extraneous stuff is secondary. I'd agree with that. In fact, I picked out a verse that kind of goes along that line. May I? Sucks to get old, so put my glasses on. All right, so this verse shows up a lot of military funerals. It's from Isaiah 6, verse 8. I heard the voice of Yahweh saying, the Lord, whom shall I send and who will go for us? And I said, here I am, send me. And I think what you just conveyed is what God was saying 2,000 years ago, 4,000 years ago in Isaiah there. It's calling. Who goes? Is there anything in it for you? Maybe not, but it's a calling.
Definitely.
And in my experience, it's not about the patriotism aspects that we hear about or the flag, although I get choked up about those things. It's about the one next to you in the airplane or in the formation or on the ground. And when, I'm not going to use one of my examples, but let's take Vietnam. You've got a four-ship of, we call them SPADs back then, the A1Es, a propeller-driven, close air support airplane, low and slow, subject to getting shot with, you know, basic rifles on the ground. It didn't have to be anything high-tech, but if there was a downed airman or troops in contact, these very vulnerable airplanes, the pilots would fly into the hot zone because it was the right thing to do. Or the search and rescue guys who would risk everything. Marcus Luttrell movie, Lone Survivor, or read the book?
I think I did read the book.
Okay.
Or saw one of the two.
Yeah, the movie was pretty good too. But Extortion 1-7, the Chinook that went in to get the survivors at that time, there was just a couple. They didn't have any gunship support. They didn't have the properly equipped CH-47s that were equipped with all the fancy high-tech defensive things. It was basically just a slick Army flying school bus. And they went in without gunship support and took an RPG, and it was the largest loss of SEALs. Of course, there was the pilots and the aircrew members as well. A couple of Rangers, I believe, were Delta. But anyway, they went in knowing that they were vulnerable, and they did it anyway. It takes courage just to sign up on the dotted line. It takes courage to get off the bus going to basic training. Yeah, the whole military experience, it doesn't matter if you were a refueler on the ground, putting gas in the jets and you never went outside the fence, or you're a Navy SEAL. It takes courage and it takes sacrifice. And you have to do a lot of things that you don't want to do. And you sometimes get asked things to do that nobody should ever have to do. So, yeah, anybody that served is special. So on that note, I'm still dealing with student pilots out at the air base. And it's a different culture now. People are coming into the military for different reasons. But, if you're here for your, min time and you want to go fly for FedEx after that, God bless you for your time. There's a different way to do this. If you wanted to go fly or if you wanted to get experience doing whatever, then coming into the military, and it would have been much easier. So, yeah. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your sacrifice. Go on and do your thing. A little bit at a time. Everybody's going to impact somebody in some way, hopefully positively. And that's part of what I enjoy with I do. Now I've got 35 years of experience flying. So I'm getting towards the end, and that's part of the reason that all of us, not me, certainly, but the people that I work with in the simulators and academic world out at Columbus, it's like we're molding these little lumps of clay into the people that they need to be to do the job. And hopefully that will involve the character and the courage to make the hard calls sometimes.